Not every psychopath is a criminal. Some are charismatic leaders. What you are about to discover will change how you see every relationship in your life. Social psychopaths are not movie monsters. They are your bosses, your colleagues, that person who charmed you on the first date. They operate under a simple rule. While you are guided by emotions, they use yours as tools. Machiavelli already foresaw this in the 16th century. His lessons in The Prince are the unwritten manual of these manipulators. In this video, identify the 3 behaviors that expose a social psychopath and learn how to protect yourself without becoming one of them. This is a warning for anyone wanting to navigate a world where empathy has become rare currency and rationality a weapon. When it comes to psychopathy, it's natural to picture faces splashed across police reports or thriller movie characters. But that's just the most obvious and rare face of the phenomenon. The social psychopath is not necessarily behind bars. They might be next to you in the meeting room, in your circle of friends, or even leading major organizations. These figures move silently among us, carrying a trait that sets them apart: the lack of genuine emotional connection. They don't feel guilt the same way most people do. They do not hesitate when faced with tough decisions. And above all, they know how to manipulate the social game with unsettling mastery. It's important to understand the difference here. Clinical psychopathy, diagnosed in offices and present in medical manuals, is linked to specific and extreme behavioral patterns. But there is a variation that escapes medical labels and fits perfectly into the functioning of the competitive world. Functional psychopathic traits. People with these traits are not killers. They are strategists. They display emotional coldness, are extremely rational, and often charismatic. They know what to say, when to say it, and to whom. They read others' emotions like a chess player anticipates an opponent's moves. Imagine a boss who never shows nervousness, who remains calm even under intense pressure. Someone who does not hesitate to fire employees or restructure teams if it means better results. Apparently, they are just efficient. But upon closer inspection, there's something beyond efficiency, a total absence of real empathy. They don't feel sorrow, they just calculate. This doesn't mean that all cold leaders are psychopaths. But those who possess functional psychopathic traits tend to thrive in environments where emotions are seen as weakness. They stand out precisely because where many hesitate, they move forward. And this is where we start to see the intersection with Machiavelli's thinking. For him, traditional morality should not be a ruler's guide. What mattered was effectiveness, and often, being effective required coldness. They know exactly what you want to hear. Their gestures are calculated, their tone of voice is engaging, and their smile, though empty, seems welcoming. The social psychopath is a master in the art of seducing without showing authentic emotion. And perhaps this is their most dangerous trump card: the ability to manipulate without raising suspicion. Unlike the classic image of aggressive and explosive individuals, these figures are calm, patient, and incredibly observant. They see the social game like few others. They read facial expressions, interpret others' emotions, and adjust their behavior surgically to get what they want. Imagine a simple situation. In a meeting, while everyone argues heatedly, there's someone who remains serene. They listen more than they speak. When they decide to intervene, their speech is precise, rational, and strangely charming. They don't impose, they seduce. Their ideas seem logical and irresistible. And before anyone realizes it, everyone is leaning toward their will. This is the power of calculated charm, different from real empathy, which comes from sincere connection. The social psychopath simulates interest and affection as tools. They praise to win over, pretend vulnerability to disarm, and appear trustworthy until they achieve their goals. And here lies the great danger. Charisma can be a mask, a carefully constructed facade to hide hidden intentions. Most people want to believe in others' goodness. We want to feel seen, heard, and valued, and that's exactly what they offer, until they no longer need to. Deep down, for the social psychopath, relationships are transactions. People are pieces to be moved, not journey partners. And when they are no longer useful, they are discarded with the same coldness with which they were manipulated. How many times, without realizing it, have you been charmed by someone who seemed to have all the answers? Someone who was kind but evasive, who knew exactly how to please but avoided exposing themselves. These subtle signs often go unnoticed until the damage is already done. Charisma is powerful, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a silent weapon. Coldness, for many, is synonymous with lack of feelings. For Machiavelli, however, it was a requirement for those who wanted to rule. In The Prince, he described a reality that few accept. The world is ruled by interests, not ideals. Virtue, in Machiavellian thought, has nothing to do with virtue in the moral sense. It is about effectiveness, cunning, and, above all, mastery of circumstances. The virtuous ruler, according to him, is one capable of acting with firmness and even cruelty if that ensures the maintenance of power and order in the state. It is important to understand that Machiavelli did not celebrate evil for evil's sake. He was a realist observer. He saw the world as a board where naivety is fatal. To stay in the game, the leader had to learn to be ruthless when necessary. Coldness, then, becomes strategic. It is emotion set aside in the name of greater objectives. Imagine, for example, a leader who must make a difficult decision, cutting benefits, laying off employees, or initiating an unpopular policy. Hesitation, in this context, can be seen as weakness. The social psychopath does not hesitate, and that is precisely what makes them dangerous. And, at the same time, effective in certain arenas. Machiavelli knew that politics is not built on good feelings. In his writings, he stated that if a ruler had to choose between being loved or feared, they should opt for fear, because love is fickle, but fear keeps people in line. Thus, the social psychopath, in a way, embodies this Machiavellian virtue. They are not guided by empathy. Their focus is control. They know that, to maintain power, they must avoid excessive pity. And in many cases, this coldness makes them admired. They are seen as someone who does what needs to be done. In several passages, Machiavelli suggests that deceit, dissimulation, and even betrayal are not only acceptable but necessary to ensure survival and dominance. One of them is especially revealing. Men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. This excerpt could easily come from the mouth of a social psychopath. For them, appearance is what matters. The social veneer is kept intact, even when their actions are cold or cruel. The secret lies precisely in maintaining the image under control, while calculated manipulation reigns behind it. But there is a dilemma. Effectiveness has a cost. The social psychopath, like the Machiavellian prince, may achieve much, but creates around themselves an environment of distrust and fear. Their relationships are superficial. The loyalty they receive is, most often, born out of necessity or fear, not genuine affection. Think of leaders who seemed invincible, but who, over time, became prisoners of their own strategy. Without real connections, All it took was a sign of weakness for them to be abandoned or betrayed. This is the paradox of power based on fear and manipulation. While everything is under control, it works. But at the first sign of weakness, it collapses. This is the intersection between Machiavellian thought and the psychopathic mind. Both understand that to rise, one must harden. But few realize that staying at the top requires more than coldness. It requires something the psychopath rarely possesses: true human connection. Deep down, what brings them together is the belief that the world is a place where winning matters more than being loved. What separates them, and what we will see next, is the price this view exacts. It is better to be feared than loved. This is undoubtedly one of the most quoted and controversial phrases from The Prince. In just a few words, Machiavelli exposes a cold and ruthless logic. Love is volatile. Fear, according to him, is stable. For the social psychopath, this maxim feels almost natural. They do not seek to be liked. They seek to be respected, or, ultimately, feared. After all, when people fear the consequences, they become predictable, and predictability means control. In work environments, this is revealed through discreet gestures. The boss who never praises but quickly punishes. The colleague who imposes with sharp looks and words, making it clear that challenging their authority will come at a cost. The partner who uses silence and emotional withdrawal as forms of manipulation. These behaviors create an atmosphere where people prefer to obey rather than confront. Fear comes to govern social dynamics, reducing the chances of resistance or questioning. For Machiavelli, this was a pragmatic choice. He knew love is fragile. It can be lost through ingratitude, mood swings, or the simple passage of time. Fear, as long as it does not turn into hatred, as he warns, is an effective mechanism for ensuring obedience and stability. It is not about terrorizing, but about making it clear that there are limits and that crossing them will have consequences. The social psychopath masters this art. They do not need to shout or make explicit threats. A simple gesture or word may be enough to instill fear, but living under the rule of fear has its price. Relationships based on intimidation are fragile and easily broken when power loses its strength. Fear guarantees obedience, but never true loyalty. In the long run, this can become a silent poison. The more someone relies on fear to lead, the more isolated they become. Surrounded by flatterers and reluctant subordinates, they lose touch with reality. And when they finally fall, few reach out a hand. The social psychopath, by adopting fear as their main tool, may achieve much, but they also plant the seeds of their own loneliness and, eventually, their downfall. In the face of chaos, coldness can be mistaken for strength, but it is more than that. For Machiavelli, it was a requirement of power. The prince, who lets himself be carried away by emotions, loses control. Those who hesitate, lose. Those who feel too much, expose weaknesses. The social psychopath understands this without needing to read Machiavelli. They live by this logic. Their emotional control is not only impressive, it is calculated. They do not react with outbursts or tears. They observe. While the world stirs, they remain. Cold, steady, and therefore dominant. In the social game, this trait offers an advantage. While most negotiate burdened with expectations and insecurities, they do only what is necessary. In competitive environments, where empathy may seem like a luxury, those who control their emotions appear to hold absolute power. But there is a subtle and decisive difference between controlling and disconnecting. The social psychopath not only keeps emotions on a tight leash, often they simply do not recognize them. Where others feel, they calculate. Where others hesitate out of empathy, they move forward without a second thought. This is virtue in its purest form, the ability to mold one's expression to the context without being a prisoner of passions. For Machiavelli, this made the difference between keeping the throne and losing it. At first, everything seems to work. The social psychopath moves forward efficiently, accumulates power, earns respect, or at least obedience. Their coldness is seen as a sign of strength. They make tough decisions without hesitation, impose themselves naturally, and keep others under control. But history shows that this game has an expiration date. The more someone relies on manipulation and fear, the more fragile their power base becomes. Little by little, the masks begin to crack. Historical examples illustrate this collapse. Leaders who ruled with an iron fist, from Roman emperors to modern tyrants, eventually found that fear is not eternal. When people do not love, they merely endure. And when there is nothing left to lose, even fear evaporates. Within organizations, the pattern repeats itself. Ruthless bosses may keep the wheels turning for a while, but over time, the environment becomes toxic. Creativity disappears, loyalty turns into mere convenience, and resentment grows in the shadows. Until one day, rebellion emerges in the form of mass resignations, covert sabotage, or an abrupt fall from grace. The social psychopath, who always saw themselves in control, fails to realize that by denying others' emotions, they plant the seed of their own failure. They underestimate the power of affection, gratitude, and sincere collaboration. To them, everything is a game, but people are not eternally obedient pieces. In the end, excessive coldness dehumanizes not only others, but the strategists themselves. Isolated, disconnected, and without true allies, they become vulnerable exactly where they thought they were invincible. At this point, effectiveness becomes a trap. The same coldness that elevated them condemns them. Because without balance, the social psychopath becomes a victim of their own disregard for the emotions they ignored. In the game of power, winning is not enough. One must endure, and no one stays at the top with fear and manipulation alone. What all this teaches us goes beyond the simple analysis of power. It reveals a fundamental paradox. Coldness, self-control, and strategy are indeed valuable tools. They can open doors and prevent us from being swallowed by a competitive and often ruthless world. But when taken to the extreme, these qualities stop being virtues. They become prisons. The social psychopath fails not because they are weak, but because they ignore the layer that sustains human relationships: empathy, connection, and trust. Without them, power is lonely and unsustainable. And this is where the reflection turns to us. How many times, in the attempt to be strong, have you distanced yourself from your emotions? How many times have you preferred control over connection? The risk lies precisely there, in turning self-defense into insensitivity, focus into indifference. The lesson here is not to abandon reason or firmness. It is to seek balance. It is possible to have self-control without becoming insensitive. It is possible to be charismatic without manipulating. It is possible to exercise power without resorting to fear as the only currency. Start small. Observe your daily reactions. When tempted to manipulate, choose dialogue. When the impulse is to dominate, seek to inspire. And when coldness seems like the only way out, allow yourself, at least for a moment, to feel. In a world where so many strive to dominate, what really matters to you? To be feared or to be remembered with respect? If you enjoyed this content and want to understand more about life's questions, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone else who is also among the awakened.